Welcome to the Lowell Planning Board meeting for November 15th, 2010. First matters on the agenda tonight, we have the acceptance of the minutes from October 18th, 2010. Any board members have any corrections on those minutes?
Mr. Chairman, and referring to the amended copy that we received, the paragraph where you had read the letters from the neighborhood groups into the minutes, and it was just noting that there was a particular project on Bridge Street that, although was not the main reason for the amendment, that was taken into consideration when they're looking at that project. I went back to listen to the minutes, and I know this is not meant to be a verbatim. I believe that the clarification of that, or the idea that was looked at, came up a little bit later in our discussion, but if there's no objection, I think that carries the general tone of the meeting. The only other question I had, Mr. Chairman, as we look at the minutes, and I went back to view the minutes. Mr. Claremont's motion was that we meet with the zoning subcommittee, so I think the implication was, and unless the maker of the motion, unless meant otherwise, that the planning board would be invited, or meet with the zoning subcommittee and invite neighborhood leaders. As I read these minutes, it doesn't say, it's ambiguous, but as I even viewed it, it was kind of worded that we would meet with them. So I don't know, Joe, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, if you're...
No, I think it was intended that we would, try to attend one of their regularly scheduled subdivision meetings, so I think that was the intent behind it.
Behind it as well, yeah. But I mean, I think the way it's worded here is fine. So with that, I'd make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll second.
Motion made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes. Any opposition? Hearing none, that motion carries. The next matter will be the acceptance of the November 1st, 2010 minutes. Any board members have any corrections on those matters?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval on the minutes of November 1st.
Motion's made
Second?
and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes. Any opposition? Hearing none, those minutes are hereby accepted. Moving along, we do have a public hearing tonight for a special permit, and this is at 451/457 Lawrence Street. This is the Lowell Planning Board will hear a public hearing to hear all interested persons relative to an application by New Lowell Properties, LLC, seeking a special permit for a project located at 451, also known as 457 Lawrence Street. The proposal includes the conversion of 2 residential units into 4 units in an existing mixed-use building. The existing building includes commercial space on the ground floor and residential units on the second and third floors. It is located on a 7,000 square foot parcel with 7 parking spaces. The project is located in traditional mixed-use zoning district and requires a special permit under section 12.1 of the Lowell zoning ordinance. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, George Theolides Jr., 133 Market Street, Lowell, and I'm here with Manuel Cavallero, who's the owner of New Lowell Properties, and the applicant this evening. You may also recognize him as the owner of one of Lowell's finest restaurants, Cavallero's Restaurant, just down the street from this site. We're here tonight because of sort of a fouled-up situation. I'm going to refer to it as that all arose from this other property that Manny's owned since he was 22 years old, 23 years old. He purchased this property as a 4-family building on Lawrence Street, and that was 15 years ago. And he's been operating it that way, and he's been paying taxes on it. I passed out to you just some brief materials from the assessor's office, including a picture in the back of where the lot is located. It's at the top of the picture with the red marking around it. I put that in there also, and I'm just going to note now, because I'm going to make reference to it in a couple of minutes. At the bottom of Lawrence Street on that map, there's a open space and a green space with a building and another open space. That's Cavaliero's Restaurant with the 2 parking lots adjacent on either side. Anyway, Manny purchased it that way. He's been paying taxes on it. As you can see, there's a sizable assessment on this property, certainly far double what most of the 2-family assessments are on that property. And it wasn't until he was in the process of moving a new tenant in on the commercial first floor space that he has that it was called to his attention by the building department that there was never a permit to construct 2 extra apartments there, notwithstanding the fact that they've been there, as I said, at least during the entire period of time that he's owned it, since 1995. So based on that, a citation was issued, as I'm sure you have in your records there, from the building department relative to pulling permits and complying with the law, which obviously we're more than willing to do if that's the case because of the problem with what the records show. But bottom line, we're here tonight to say that basically there are 4 units there. I'm sure you probably, I know you all do your homework, and I'm sure you've all seen the building. It's a huge building. Each floor has 3,000 square feet on it approximately. And as I said, it's been operating as a 4-family for I don't know how long, but as I said, certainly before Manny bought it and when he purchased it. There are some other issues that, as a result of the application that have been raised that I'd like to just address briefly. One of them is with regard to the parking. The parking in the rear of the building. They were probably in an informal, and I'll say informal because, as you well know, it's just not the common thing in that neighborhood or many of the residential neighborhoods to actually line off parking spaces. And they're also in a situation when Mr. Damaris put the plan together for us that he did that indicate that the parking spaces are not large enough. What I intend to do, if we are successful this evening in having you endorse the current use, is to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and ask for assistance on that issue. And then to go back to the second issue, which is the parking itself. There are not enough legal, by today's standards, parking spaces. And what we're prepared to do by way of a condition, if you find the rest of this amenable, is to make it as a condition that the Cavaliero family, who own not only the restaurant and about 40 spaces up there, but also another property across the street at 506, almost immediately across the street, that has another 20 parking spaces, all of which could be made available for any overflow parking that's necessary there. There is also, we're certainly willing to, there are some recommendations, and I have to say that Mr. Clausen did a very good job on summarizing this thing, and if you look at page, I'm not sure if it's numbered or not, but if you look at the page where he makes his commentary, and there are 4 basic things there that I guess I'd like to address. The parking one I just spoke about. The dumpster, certainly we're willing to make that a condition that we screen the dumpster. I believe with regard to number 3 that this building, though it's a brick building, relatively new brick building back to 85 or 88, is consistent with the rest of the neighborhood. I'm sure you saw that when you saw it. I mean, this is a neighborhood that's very tight and very close. There's not a lot of space around there. Which leads me into the issue of stormwater drainage and the area in the front. Manny has indicated to me that he's more than willing, even though it might be slightly to the detriment of his tenants on the first floor, the commercial user, to remove 5 or 6 feet or whatever he can work out with the planning department, plant some grass and plant some trees there to try and beautify it. What we don't want to get into, quite frankly, and I think would not make any sense is raising curbs and changing sidewalks and all of that stuff now, because where do you start and where do you stop, especially if you're familiar with that neighborhood, as you've seen? I mean, you just can't do that very easily. I would assume that at some day in the near future, the city will probably, hopefully, as part of a neighborhood renewal, do something with all of Lawrence Street, because it could be a very critical, different kind of place, I think, in the future. So, as I indicated, what we would do is not only take out some of that macadam in the front, plant some grass, but also some trees, and then whatever water flow comes from the back, which normally just goes to the street, that will pick up some of that. I mean, we and nobody else in this city can afford to put in a fully engineered stormwater runoff system here. It just isn't something that's typical and indigenous to a city the type of Lowell that Lowell is. So I would ask you, well, certainly Manny and I are here to answer any questions you have, but I would ask you to endorse his continued use of the property as a four-family and allow us, with the conditions that I mentioned and any others you might suggest that would be reasonable and amenable to my client. And again, ready to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. The fact, I just want to bring out to your attention that I know it's requesting a special permit. We do have 4 members here this evening, so you would need the vote of all 4 members. So we can proceed with the public hearing. We could continue it over to another date if you're requesting that all 5 members be present, or we could go forward with the hearing tonight and then still request a continuance to a further date to the 5th board members here, because we approved through the council what's called the Mullen Rule, where Mr. Lockhart, who couldn't make it tonight, could review the recordings of this proceedings and then be brought up to date after signing a form that he's up to date on the matter, and then he would be able to vote on this vote as well.
Mr. Chairman, we're more than willing to go forward on tonight's attendance.
Right, thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Then, Council, do you have anybody with you who wants to speak before I turn it over to the public?
Not at this point.
Okay. Okay, at this point in time, I'll ask, does anyone here want to speak in favor of this project?
Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board, my name is Mark Goldman, 58 Oakland Street, Lowell, Mass. Wish to be recorded in favor of this. As the attorney just said, it is pre-existing 4-unit apartments in the 2nd floor, and it would fit with the neighborhood character. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Anyone else like to speak in favor? In favor? In favor? Hearing none, that portion of public hearing is closed. Anyone like to speak in opposition? In opposition? In opposition? Hearing none, that portion of public hearing is closed. At this point in time, I'll turn it over to any of the board members who have any questions, comments, or concerns.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure, Mr. Fischette?
Attorney Alides, I just want to clarify, again, it was pre-existing, because when I looked at the material, granted, I think they're citing just the violation and how it's worded, working without the benefit of a building permit, changing existing 3-unit, 2 residential, 1 commercial, to 4 residential and 1 commercial. But that, as I understand it, that was not what your client did. That was purchased this way.
Correct.
And it's been operating in that manner.
Correct.
I have to tell you, it's not as clear-cut. I went to the site today, and I actually drove in there, and it's tight. It's similar to a site on Rogers Street where the last meeting we recommended denial to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Similar type of layout, except it was actually a horseshoe all around the building, where you also had a side entrance that came, if you're not careful, you're stepping right out into the cars going in the back. I know today there was a car parked not in one of the designated parking areas, but more or less close to the building, facing the fence, and, I had to do a 10-point turn to try to get out of there, and it was not easy. I can't even imagine what it would be like in the wintertime.
If I may, that's why we intend to mark it off, no parking, put the signage up and enforce it. And that's why I think it's important for us to have the other parking spaces available, certainly for the evening time.
It's difficult because there's also the back decks that take away from some of the space that you have back there to maneuver. I just have a question, Aaron, question for you with some sort of landscaping in the front. There really isn't a lot of space from the building to the street. We've run into this before. I don't know if there's even landscaping that would enhance the building, and I don't believe there's any landscaping that would take care of water runoff. I don't even know if that's in theory, it sounds like a good idea, but I don't know, looking at that site. If you give me a little thought on recommendation on that.
Sure, I'll just step back for a second and note that as far as the stormwater and landscaping on the site, one of the recommendations from the city engineer was to actually take the front area from the building to the right-of-way, which is approximately 10 feet, give or take, and remove the impervious surface and landscape it. And then she also, Lisa DeMeo, being the city engineer, also identified the left side of the building as you're facing the building, which is all impervious surface, removing that. Landscaping is not necessarily going to infiltrate all of the stormwater. In fact, it won't. But it is going to be an improvement over the existing conditions, which is now all impervious. The state stormwater standards, which have been incorporated into the zoning code, require an improvement over the existing condition for redevelopment sites. It doesn't designate or identify a standard for that. It's based on the scope of the project.
If the condition is improved.
Improved.
yeah.
And landscaping will improve it. And I didn't take the time in the comments to identify exactly what would be a good intervention, except that, simply having a lower ground kind of plant material with a couple of street trees would be an improvement, be an enhancement. 10 feet would be more than enough for a street tree to survive. I mean, we've all seen street trees in the sidewalk and with 2 by 2 foot planter boxes. So this provides enough area for an improvement, and the street tree can certainly add and enhance the environment along Lawrence Street. But you can do something there. There's enough room, and it'll improve the stormwater to a degree, but it's certainly not going to fix it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just looking at the current conditions where looking for the variances that you'll be applying for is a lot area per dwelling unit, number of parking spaces provided, and usable open space. Tough, this would have been a lot easier had it been work that was happening right now. I do have, I think it would be, in my estimation, easy to say that, I would not recommend approval, but I guess it's a difficult situation. We're looking at an existing set of circumstances that have been operating for quite some time. And quite frankly, it's a luxury to have any parking in that neighborhood, the fact that it does have some. So like I said, weighing it, it's if we can improve something that's already existing without creating a hardship, it probably is the best way to go. I certainly would not be willing to approve this if this was work that was in the process of, adding another unit, and it just doesn't make any sense, to be honest with you. All right, I have no further comments, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fischett. Mr. Gentleman, do you have any questions, comments, concerns?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many bedrooms in each of these units?
2 in each.
2 bedrooms each unit.
Two
in each.
Yeah.
So, if I'm reading the code right, Aaron, help me out with this. I think we're looking at 2 spaces per dwelling unit.
That's correct.
Is that, so we need, by code, we need 8 parking spaces.
If you look at the bottom of Mr. Damaris's chart, you'll see, I believe, that we're required to have 11. And
So,
so it's 2 for each of the,
two, and plus 2 spaces for each curb cut? Is that,
No, it's because there's a ground floor retail space. And so there's, the way that the space is allocated
you
right
see
now.
number
it's-
5, Mr. Gendron, on that plan, I think he breaks it down. It's the 3 spaces for the retail and the 8 for the residential, which is how we get 11. Just if I can, to get back to Mr. Frichette's comment, I mean, obviously, whether it be this board or by virtue of a variance that we would seek at the zoning board, we intend to, just as the code provides, provide for extra parking spaces within, actually, I measured it off on the GIS system today, it's 475 feet, and if I'm mistaken, it's either 12 or 1,500 feet under the code. I'm sure Aaron could correct me on that, but it's certainly plenty close to that particular thing.
so you're talking about down at the restaurant?
Right.
At the restaurant,
Or
provide additional
across
parking.
the street at the, which is even closer, the property that they own across the street at 500 block is even closer. They have 20 spaces in the back there, and there are how many units? 5 units there, so they're only required to have 10. There are actually 10 extra spaces in the back of that property. And I think that shows here, Manny, is this, can you pick that off from there? This is,
Right here. Right there, 506, 516.
okay, it's sort of in the middle, if I may. At the top, it's the lot that has, to the left of the one where there's a dot, I guess I'll call it a dot, a blue dot. And that's an area back there where they have 20 spaces that they only need 10 for.
I see.
So we can
And
fit
what's in the retail space?
Pardon me?
What is in the retail space right now?
Well, honestly, we'd need a sort of a variance there as well, technically, if we were to deal with that, because there are, I mean, if you look at every store there, Mr. Gendron, there just are no parking spaces on Lawrence Street. It's the nature of the neighborhood. And what happens is, and I was there again today, I mean, people pull up in the front of the building. When I say the front of the building, off the street, but as close as you can get to the building. It's probably not a good idea, and that's probably why I would agree with Mr. Clausen's suggestion that we try to come up with some sort of a buffer there to keep people off of there. Doesn't solve the stopping problem. But I would say that in the roughly 1 hour's time I was there today, I only saw one car pull up there, and 95% of the people who went in and out of that little store were neighborhood people. It's truly a neighborhood convenience. It's not a place that I would drive to go to a convenience store, and I don't think too many other people would be doing just that either. Might stop for a quart of milk or something like that, but beyond that, I only saw one car pull up to the front in that area that I was just talking about.
So it's a neighborhood convenience store?
Oh, absolutely.
And that's the only tenant?
That's
That's the only tenant right now?
right.
All right. Well, this is, you know, I hear the argument about, well, the rest of the neighborhood's real congested, but I really don't subscribe to the fact that, well, so an additional congestion is okay because the neighborhood's congested. I think that, you know, the zoning regulations are there to mitigate congestion in the neighborhoods, and I think it's really, really important that we control that, because, you know, if we set precedents that we allow additional congestion into the neighborhood because, oh, well, it's already congested, then pretty soon, you know, we'll have neighborhoods that nobody will want to live in.
Well said, but I would say it's existed that way for 15 years, and no one's ever had a problem.
I hear you.
There hasn't been a
So I
single
hear you. I
complaint.
know, I understand the situation, but I'm stating the concern I have with setting a precedent for
Legitimate.
doing stuff like this. And we're looking at, the regulation here is 2,500 square feet per dwelling unit. And and we're going down, if I calculated it right here, 1725 land area per dwelling unit, and that's for the 4 dwelling units in the building, so. So we're violating the land area per dwelling unit, we're violating the parking, and we're violating the open space, as Mr. Frechette pointed out. But we do seem to have a solution, albeit not a great one, for the parking, but at least there's something there that we could hang our hat on. So it's a very difficult, if we had a zoning board application for something just like this, I'd be, voting to recommend denial immediately. But it becomes a more difficult situation because of the existing nature of the hardship. So that's what I'm thinking right now, kind of thinking out loud. I'd like to hear what the other board members have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Claremont?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It certainly is a difficult situation. I understand the current owner, having owned it for 15 years and having purchased it as a four-unit with commercial underneath, probably came as a surprise to him when he found out that that wasn't the case. I'm just wondering, in your research, if you found out prior to the fire, how is the building set up? Do you know?
Prior to,
Prior to the fire and the rebuild in 1988.
Manny's too young, I don't know, I'm not sure to tell
Yeah,
you.
I'm wondering if it was 4 apartments, 2 apartments, or if anybody knows that.
I'd only be guessing, Mr. Claremont.
It looks like the permits that were issued in 1988, according to the building department, had the retail down below and 2 apartments above. 1 apartment per floor,
Correct,
3,000 square feet,
3,000,
9-room apartment.
huge.
So, they must have been huge apartments or permanent for huge apartments. Are those residential units, are they separately metered at this point?
No. I think 2 of them are, the residential units, I think there's 4 meters there, if I'm not mistaken.
There's
On the
one.
side of the, go ahead.
There's 3 meters and then there's a house meter.
So there's 1 for each floor.
There's 1 for each
And he
floor.
pays the
One per
electricity.
floor, right, yeah.
Yeah, and he pays the electricity.
All right, so you pay the utilities, and
Right.
so they're not separately metered.
There's 3 different meters on site.
I'm sorry, Mr.
There's 3 different meters
1 for each floor.
on site.
Correct.
So when you drive in the driveway to the right, there's 3 different electric meters there. And then on the left of the building, there's 3 different gas meters.
Right.
Yeah, I think the comments of the board members are probably well taken in terms of, we're concerned about additional congestion, but after 15 years, I think we know what the congestion is going to be, because that's the way it's been for 15 years. And I have my concerns as well. If we were to put it back to 2 9-room apartments, 3,000 square feet, what does that lead to? If you have 4 bedrooms, 3,000 square feet, there's gonna be cars there as well. I do have a question, though, about the additional parking that you might have available. You mentioned you had 506 Lawrence Street that had 20 parking spaces possibly available. What is that parking used for now?
Manny stores 1 or 2 of his trucks there, he and his father, and also in the construction business, mostly Manny's. And the rest of it just for the building, I think,
Right,
there.
just for the tenants.
He has no other off-site users of
All right,
that.
so is it currently used for overflow parking for that building now?
I don't know if he's ever offered that, do you?
No, I never offered,
He's
I
never
never
offered
needed
it.
to, no.
Yeah. No one has ever complained about parking there,
But
that's the whole thing.
right now, it's not utilized for any other use, those 20 parking spaces.
No.
So you park a few cars there, you'd have, say, 15 spaces available over there, is that correct?
Maybe.
Well, no, there are 8, excuse me, how many units? 4?
5.
5 units, so there are 10 that are required for the building, so there would be an additional 10, not counting.
Across the street, we're talking about a
Right,
506.
across the street would be an extra 10 spaces that we could make available, and we really only need 3 on site according to the zoning code. 3 more, excuse me.
All right, I have no other questions, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Let me just follow up with, when you're saying across the street at 506, is that the laundromat?
Is that, I'm sorry.
right across the street from this site
Right.
is a laundromat.
Right. It's not there. It's a little further down.
Okay, be going out Lawrence Street
Part of his building.
further.
Right. It's
Right.
not part of his
Probably
building.
about,
So if you're going past the laundromat, heading up towards the restaurant, it'd be a little
on the
further on the
right-hand
left?
side, like maybe 2 homes down on the right-hand side, left-hand side, excuse me.
Okay,
Across from Swift Street, exactly.
okay, I know where Swift Street is, okay,
Right across from Swift, yeah.
okay. Because, basically, when I was up there looking at it yesterday morning, I probably observed what Mr. Lightis says. The people who came to use the convenience store, none of them park in the back. None. Actually, one of them parked in the driveway,
In the driveway, yeah. They
would
sneak
have
in,
blocked the parking spaces from the rear.
they sneak in there, but we're hopeful that we can,
Basically, when I was there yesterday morning, when I went around the back, there was a car parked in front of the dumpster. There was a car parked in your spaces 5, 6, and 7. And then, when you go in and take the left, all the way down to the left, there was a truck and then a car there, so you couldn't utilize spaces 1, 2, and 3. So as a result, I backed out from 4 all the way back down and out the driveway because there was no way to turn around back there, the way the cars were parked now. And what I did notice is the people who did come to use the convenience store, some parked in front of the street, and there was a truck there and some other, one was like a van, but I don't know if they were actually for this building, because the building to the left is a 2-family, and they have no parking whatsoever.
Correct, yeah.
And that's very, very tight. I mean,
right,
there's none.
yeah.
Your building to your right is set back a little bit. That's a small 2-family. And then to the right of that, you have L&M Auto Spring Service, right?
Right.
Okay. So a little bit was, I think, would be, how do you pick up? Because I think the parking would be, the people aren't going to use the parking in the rear for the store. It's not going to happen. No. So one car, I did see it parked on the inside of the sidewalk, facing the building. So I don't know if you really want that to be a parking spot. You know what I'm saying what a parking spot is? Like, you look at the door there, and this car was right there, here's the sidewalk, then there's a car on the street.
The mixed emotions, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
I saw the same thing.
So I can understand what planning and development saying, if you green it, you landscape it, you do something with it, at least you'll alleviate that parking spot. Most of the other people did pull right up, they were in a convenience store and out quickly. The one who parked on the driveway there, that's why I think some of the suggestions, I think a lot of the suggestions really from the city engineer department have a lot of substance to them. But the fact was, you put the no parking there, question of cutting the curb cut in so you can designate where the opening is, and I think that would cut down on people not parking directly in front of the building where that car was parked. I think one person I did see did park across this, came out of the convenience store and went over and parked at the Mill City laundromat. I don't know if they were in the laundromat first or not, or they just happened to park there and run across the street. I don't know, because they were there before before I received. So I think, at least some of the comments by the city engineer, I think if we do look to try to allow this, that a lot of these conditions here would make some of this situation work well. The curb cuts to match the drive lane, removed impervious surface in front of the building where cars were parked. Parking space need to be 3 feet off property line. Right side property line should have signage, no parking. So therefore, if that person happened to be there for a period of time, those cars could get out in the rear. The residential parking in the back should be labeled so people know exactly where their spot is. What was the other ones? They're asking for the granite curb, which we understand. Sidewalk should be repaired, replaced. Engineer officer should be contacted about site inspections and copy of the as-built. So I think those considerations, and I don't know how you feel towards those, Council, but I think a lot of those do have merit to try to make this project work if necessary. Did you have an opportunity to see the letter that we received from the city engineer?
I did,
Do
yes.
you have any comments about those?
I do. That's why I addressed it from the standpoint of Mr. Clausen's recommendations. adjusting the curb cut to match the drive lane, I mean, I'm not quite sure what exactly is going to be changed with what happens in the front there. And I understand, well, first of all, anything that happens to that curb, I looked it over pretty good today, would be a massive headache and a massive project. And then what are we going to do? Raise the curbs or adjust the curbs there, and then have every other site on the street be inconsistent with what that is? It would be a hodgepodge. I say the same thing with reference to the sidewalk. I mean, you can put in a brand-new sidewalk there, but what are we doing? Going from the old, pardon my expression, crappy sidewalk that's there now onto a 25-foot stretch of nice sidewalk that's going to probably be at a different height along the way, and go from there. I mean, I'm not arguing that what's there is beautiful, don't get me wrong, but, you know, my point is, where do you begin and end when you're trying to get into some of these things? And that's why I mentioned that. The impervious, remove all the impervious surfaces on the front and the left sides of the building. I don't know what you accomplish by removing the whole left-hand side of the building. It's not pretty. If you're asking me, I'm not an expert, believe me, but at least we know the water's running to the front from there, and it probably has been from the beginning of time. There's not enough land on that property to deal with all the water drainage necessarily. So I can understand where there's a concern about stormwater drainage. So I mean, I guess the dilemma is, yes, if we have all these conditions, these things can all be part of doing something there. I'm not sure what they really accomplish, except to maybe meet what the book says is supposed to be the way the thing is done. And if we don't, I hate to put it this way, I never like to say things this way, but if we do nothing, we have what we have there. So I'm
Maybe
trying
not,
to
though.
find,
Maybe not. I mean, you know, we got the order of that he's not in compliance. That doesn't mean they're gonna say, leave it as is.
well, the building is, if a permit isn't sought, and there's nothing else that's done there, there's no code violation there. There's no code violation for lack of stormwater. And again, I really didn't want to get into this, Mr. Chairman. I'm just saying that, yes, I can live with conditions, and I think what Mr. Clausen has said are reasonable things to deal with to try to help this situation. And you know, Mr. Chairman, I never like to not follow the recommendations of the board when it comes to some of these reasonable things. I'm willing to take, as I said, let me continue on. Parking spaces need to be 3 feet off the property line. Well, none of we're not designating the right-hand side of the driveway as a parking space, a legitimate parking space. So what, I mean, we can mark that off, and we intend to try and do that. As you said, it does make an inconvenience for people pulling in and out, and there shouldn't be anyone parking there. But again, those aren't really parking spaces. I'm not sure why she referred to them as parking spaces.
I think the question was just basically put the no parking sign there so people don't continue to park there when they go in and out of the store, is what I imagine what they're requesting, because that's the behavioral pattern that we see now. So the parties say don't park there.
I have no problem, as I said, with trying to enforce a no parking.
I'm sorry, is that comment referring to the parking space in the rear, Aaron, or the parking space on the right?
The 3-foot setback comment, it's referring to the parking spaces in the rear, so.
He wasn't talking about the
I
parking space on
stand
the right, he
corrected.
was talking about the one
That is
in the rear.
okay, I'm sorry.
I mean, I think the parking spaces in the rear wouldn't be a problem to line them up properly, you know, make them 3 feet off the property line. That's done very minor adjustment. But I think part of, like we're saying with the curb cuts, it designates that area so people aren't really parking on the inside part of the sidewalk, which isn't allowed in the city anywhere anyways. So I think by doing that curb cut, I think that's one of the reasons they're saying that by putting the curb cut in there, bringing it in with the other curb cut, you won't have the people who pull up on the inside of the sidewalk to get in and out to go to the convenience store. So I think
So will-
that curb cut would eliminate that problem, and I think what some of that would be.
But I thought we were going to eliminate it by taking the surface away, the macadam surface away, and putting some landscape there.
Well, I guess you could do it both ways. Put the landscape and still put the curb cut. I
Fine.
mean, the city engineer mentioned the curb cut. I know the landscaping came from Division of Planning and Development, but the city engineer is the one who put the labels of the granite curbing and the sidewalks, 3 feet off the property line. They did mention remove all impervious surface in the front and left side of the building. That was one that was also mentioned by the city engineer. But they didn't mention how, so.
I may be able to clarify that a little
Sure.
bit. What the city engineer is referring to on the curb cut is essentially taking the curb cut, what you see on the plan, which is the 15 feet, and moving it to the right so that it's aligned with the drive lane for cars pulling into the back of the parking lot. That's for two reasons. One of them is, right now, the way it's aligned is it's got a natural barrier to prevent cars from using that space right along the boundary line, and encourages parking there, parallel parking on the side. The other reason for that is making a right turn onto the site with the alignment of the curb cut is you're making almost a 180-degree turn, particularly if there's another car coming out. So it's a challenging turn to make, and one that causes potential problems for vehicular and pedestrian interaction. There's a lot of pedestrian activity in this neighborhood. This has been noted a number of times. A lot of people come to the store here, walk to the store, which is what is the intent of the neighborhood. So I think what the city engineer, well, I know what the city engineer is referring to is just moving that over to the right so that the turning movement is more direct into the travel lane into the back of the building, and to also discourage parking along the parcel boundary, which is really intended to be a drive lane, not a parking area. As far as the landscaping, I can't speak directly to what the city engineer was recommending in terms of landscaping, but what I was referring to was the area directly in front of the building, from the building to the right-of-way, so the back of the sidewalk. I wasn't recommending any kind of removal of curbing. I would absolutely want to keep that curbing there because that preserves on-street parking, which is where we want to see the people parking for, if they are going to drive to the commercial use. That's where they want to be parking. It's a more convenient space, pulling into the back of the building, et cetera, et cetera. So the area that I was suggesting would be used for landscaping, it could be used for landscaping, is from the front of the building to the back of the sidewalk, and not including the area that would be the drive lane to gain access to the back. As far as the side of the building for landscaping, I assume that the city engineer is talking about the back of the building forwards. The back behind the building, you would want to keep that paved so that the cars have room to maneuver, to pull out of the spaces and then pull back out onto the street.
Aaron, if I could ask that the 3 feet off the property line for the parking, so I can understand though, is that also the back lot property line as well?
So
This is not gonna fly, to be honest with you.
Yeah, right. The dimensional standard for setbacks for parking spaces is 3 feet off any parcel boundary line. And there's good reason for that, just to keep cars from being too close to a parcel boundary. But in this case, it makes sense for the right and left parcel boundaries as you're looking at the building. But the back, it may make sense just to keep it as is, because there's 22 feet from the parking stall to the back of the building. If you take away 3 feet, that's 19 feet, which doesn't give a lot of room for maneuvering. So it'd be almost better to keep it right up against the fence. It's an existing parking situation, so it's.
Yeah, because that 22 runs to the building, but that, if you notice, there's the porch too, the two-story porch. If you put that into consideration, when you're behind those spots, there's hardly any room. That's where I was trying to maneuver myself today. It's not a lot of room back there, so that just couldn't
Right, so that
happen.
even makes it even tighter
Yeah.
to move that. So I think in this case, I understand what the city engineer is getting at. There's probably some ability to provide a 3-foot buffer on the left side. There is a 3-foot buffer on the right because of the dumpster.
The dumpster, right.
But along the back parcel boundary, it'd be taking too much of the maneuver space away. It'd be, the best case scenario would be to do it, but it's just not there.
Yep.
This is a fence back there, right? You park up to the fence, so there's a little buffer between that and the neighbor's property.
Right, right. There's I think it's an opaque fence, actually, so you can't see through.
So based on Aaron's comments, Mr. Chairman, if we need to move it over, I misunderstood that. I mean, I guess we can. And my only hesitation, as I say, is it just seems to me that it's going to create a lot of dig up the street and then put a different curb in a different spot adjacent to, my recollection is, I'm going to guess that that curb is probably no more than 4 inches higher than the street right now, if that. Yeah, I would say. But if that makes it work, Mr. Chairman, we'll do it.
Any board members? Mr. Gentleman?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I had another comment. So, as I said before, I worry about setting precedents in situations like this, because I think we need to be very concerned about congestion in the neighborhoods. And as I said before, I don't really support the argument that, well, it's congested anyway, so it doesn't really matter because we need to draw the line. I also don't really have a lot of sympathy for the fact that, you bought the building 15 years ago and didn't know, because, that, I'm sorry about that, but you should know when you buy a building what the parameters are, and it is out of code. The thing that does register in my mind as maybe a reason to support this is what Mr. Claremont says, and that is that what's the alternative? We can deny this and force you to go to a 2-unit apartment, which would be 3,000 square feet and with 4 bedrooms, and is that a better situation? Probably not. Probably not. So I think the best approach for us is maybe to make an exception in this case and proceed toward the best situation we can get given the conditions we're under. In looking through the city engineer's comments, I really don't see anything that's outrageous. I support the curb, the granite curb, and the repaired sidewalk, even if it is the only granite curb and repaired sidewalk on the street, because you got to start somewhere. Maybe your neighbor will be in here in another month and have the same situation. Well, we'll have them put in a curb and a sidewalk too. Plus, it is a convenience store there, so I think having a curb, could be safer, and a new sidewalk might be a safety asset. So I think I'm willing to make an exception in this case because of those reasons. But I would make that exception with the conditions that the city engineer has suggested, perhaps with the exception of the back property line, the parking spots in the back property line, because I do see it would make those parking spaces, it would basically eliminate those parking spaces if we tried to keep it off of the back property line by 3 feet, because you wouldn't be able to get in and out. So I think an exception would have to be made there. But with the exception of that, I think that the city engineer's recommendations are reasonable.
Does that, if I may, Mr. Chairman, through the chair, does that include, Mr. Gendron, removing that whole section, front to back, of impervious on the left-hand side of the building?
I don't know about that. I guess I would have to. I'd have to defer to the planning department to, Aaron, what's your feeling on that? Is that something that would be an asset?
It would improve the stormwater flow. Again, the infiltration is hard to determine because we don't have borings, we don't know what the material is under the impervious surface. And the city engineer didn't want to require that because she felt excessive to do so for something like this, and felt that just removing the impervious surface along the left and front side where there isn't any need for it would be enough of improvement. Whether or not it's great for infiltration or not. If you look at the topography, the lines show that there's a gradual slope towards the street. So right now, all the water runs basically to the street into a catch basin, which is a combined sewer. Having the left side and the front landscaped would at the very least slow that, and would be a benefit, in a very, admittedly, very small element of the entire picture for the stormwater. But it slow down that flow rate into the catch basins and improve, in that one small piece of the larger picture, the overflow issue, the combined sewer overflow issue.
There are
It's one
stairways,
step in the right.
there are stairways to egress the building on that side of the building. I don't know how that's going to affect somebody trying to get out at that point and going on to a grassed area or gravel area.
Well, the steps come down and out the front to the sidewalk, right?
That's the main way out, but I'm saying there are exits out of the building from that location. Only pointing it out, I'm
Yeah, but I
not,
think.
not the
They're only
engineer.
talking about the property to the right and left of the front steps.
No, they're talking about the entire, the recommendation is to remove the surfaces on the front and left sides of the building. Left side, my understanding was to remove, maybe, if it's only the front, maybe Aaron can correct us, if it's only to the left on the front side of the building, I have no problem, because it conforms and comports with what I said before. But Aaron, is that your understanding, or was it your understanding the engineer wanted it removed all the way to the back?
All the way, I believe it's all the way to the back of the building, not to the back of the property line. And I don't know if grass presents a problem for a second means of egress for a pathway to the street. I can check on that.
So, I mean, I'm talking on the front, it would be to the right of the stairs and to the left of the stairs. On the map that we have in front of us.
Along the front facade, yes, that was the comment that I had.
Then-
And then along the left side of the building, from the back to the front. was what
Now, on the
city-
left side, when we go down the left side, there's the two-level overhead porch. Is that is she talking to the left of the two-level overhead porch?
Everything at ground level from the back of the building to the front, to the back of the edgewalk, back of the
Because
sidewalk.
with the two-level overhead porches, that's basically, if I remember correctly, is decks. Right, Mandy, they're basically decks there, there's
Correct,
underneath, if I remember correctly, the gas meters were underneath.
Correct.
You look like you have decks with stairways
Right.
that go all the way up.
It's in
Correct.
egress, right.
So when we go down to the left of that, that was all cement. And then where that stopped, you had approximately, from there to the property line, I would say maybe 3 feet.
Correct. But my point,
With the level overhead porches, correct? From there to that next property line, I mean, where those porches stop, where that overhead is, from there to the property line, I measured approximately 3 feet.
Oh, yeah, right. He's
So, I
measuring
mean,
from here
are
to
they
here.
talking about
Right.
putting
3
all
feet.
that under the decks as well as everything else as well?
Yes,
Snow shoes. How do you shovel it? How do you come in?
but again, it's a walking space, it's an egress space. How do you shovel the grass in the wintertime?
I don't see how it's gonna work, yeah.
Maybe as a compromise, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that the impervious surface in the front of the building be removed, and on the left side it be removed, just level with the front of the building to the property line. This way the entire front would be removed. You could do your landscaping there, but leave the impervious area in that small space where the two-level overhead porch is. It only appears to be about 2 feet from the porch to the property line there.
That's
That'd be-
three at the
That,
most.
I think would be difficult to maintain if it was a grassed area or whatever. As you say, there's some,
That's
there's some,
agreeable, Mr.
there's some stairways there that people walk onto, so
I think that makes sense, Mr.
you
Chairman.
may
We
not
would
want to do
agree
that.
with
But if you grass this entire area in the front of the building and carried that grass over to the property line on the left side, that would knock off quite a bit of the impervious area. And throw that out as a middle-of-the-road
Well,
compromise.
that's certainly acceptable to us, and I think it's gonna eventually find its way down to that grass there and go into the ground. So I think that, again, for safety's sake, I just can't see people coming out of that location in the wintertime.
And I think, I understand what you're saying, because if you look underneath that two-level overhead porch, nothing would grow under there anyways.
No, oh, I
I mean, you
agree.
put dirt there, grass there, it's gonna turn into hot dirt. You know, same as the cement that's there now, and it's just gonna run off it anyways. So what we'd really be looking at would be just, and the way I measured it was foot to foot. I had 3 feet from the edge out, and to just do one strip back of the 3 feet, I know it opens up a little bit more in the back, but I think of the front, you could, I mean, a lot would happen on the front. I think it would beautify it a lot more. It'd be a lot easier to just do the front and stop in the front, as Attorney Claremont indicated. I think that parking spot that people have a tendency to park at right now would be eliminated.
Right.
And if you put the little bit of the, dress it up a little bit, I think, the purpose is, the city code really doesn't like people parking to the inside of
Sure.
the sidewalk. I mean, that
That's
one
fine.
spot there,
That's fine, Mr.
that person would park somewhere else maybe, hopefully in front where they belong. And like I said, and I sat there, when I watched those cars up front, I don't believe, they might not have been anybody in this building, because I know the building to the left, as I said, had no parking at all, and those cars didn't move, so it could have been anybody in that neighborhood, because it is tight, and there is tough off-street accommodations there. So not saying that anybody who parked in front of his building had any use of his building. But the people to the left, when they come out, when I watched them, they didn't go to any cars, they went across the street, but, so I could see when maybe a compromise, if the board's willing to consider that for the, what would be for the remove the impervious surface in the front of the building. So if we try to go down the list of the recommendations from the city engineer, the one would be to adjust the curb cut in the front, and I think we indicated how it doesn't match up now to the driveway. So what you do is you make that curb cut, which is at where it is now to the right, you'd actually push that back a little further, so that lines up properly with the entrance to the driveway. Right. What Aaron was trying to say is, because it makes it tough for cars pulling in and pulling out if they're not going straight and they have to go to that curb cut. And then I know the curb cut's pretty small once you get in front of Mr. Espinola's property for his two-family setback, because once you get to the spring service people, they don't have a curb cut at all, that's just all wide open.
They got nothing right.
Right, so that curb cut itself, to your neighbor to your right, can't be that big.
It isn't. It clearly
So
isn't.
this would just bring it up. I mean, it shows it here on plan, but it'd be almost like bringing that curb cut back to where your property line would be. And that way it would be consistent with your driveway. It also may help if you're pushing the snow back there and pushing it over to the left corner or something when you're plowing, instead of coming out and hitting that curb as well.
Right.
So if you adjust the curb cut to match the drive lane, which was requested, and if we'll to consider remove all impervious surfaces to the front of the building, parking space need to be 3 feet off property line. I don't think the board had a big, strong concern about the 3 feet in the rear due to the fact that there already is a fence there, and it is tight to begin with back there. So if we kind of went around that recommendation, if the right side would have a sign for no parking, and I think that should be more out to be, which shouldn't be a problem. I think there's a fence right there, isn't there, the
Correct.
wood fence right there?
There is,
When you
yes.
come in, I think it's, before you have the entrance that goes to the side where the meters are and the mailboxes are.
Right on the corner.
So if you had the sign right there, just have no one park in your driveway.
Right.
That'd be easy to post a sign there. Then, residential parking spaces should be labeled. That would just be a matter of label them in the back and assign them to each person's spot. So when people do come down and say, you're in my spot, people would know which spots are whose.
Right.
If they put in the granite curbing, would be able to pull over where that curb cut is. Repair the sidewalk. Engineering office wants to come over and see the site inspections. And then they talked about the stormwater, and I think a lot of that stormwater regulation is, I think, by putting in some of the pervious in the front, helps with that stormwater mandate that the city has. I mean, it's not a lot, but it's something.
Right.
So, just going through a couple of the other comments, I know this isn't for a site plan approval, but one of the other concerns that just came out was the fire department said you might need a fire alarm system in there, or depending on if it's rehab, there may need a sprinkler system. So that'd be something to take a look at to see what you'd need.
Correct.
I think, and that would be for your benefit anyways, if it doesn't have it already. I mean, it would help you on the insurance aspect of it, the safety part of the building, especially in a tight congested neighborhood like that. I mean, it's a nice brick facade building, it sticks out nicely, but it's tight with the other buildings nearby, so obviously that type of fire system would be for the benefit of all. I don't know if the boards have any comments on some of those conditions that I try to plug away with, I think, any other conditions,
Mr. Chairman, I would just note on the condition with the impervious surface on the front of the building and to the property line on the left side of the building. So not just in front of the building, but all the way to the property line on the left-hand side. And I think that's just, other than that.
I think we
it's-
understood that. I mean, if we're going to work on that area, we're going to
Yep.
work on the whole area.
The only other question I have is, for the parking, if you had parking, how many people run the convenience store now? 1 or 2 people on a regular basis?
Probably about 2.
I think usually, something like this, what we look at a lot of time is start with having them park off-site and come down a little bit. That makes it easier, frees up the parking spaces. Because that's a car that's gonna be there for a regular employment shift, no matter how long that may be. So usually when we consider off-street parking, we always say put the employees there to free them up. 'Cause people want the business to park, if they can't park there, they're gonna go somewhere else.
Well, they'll kill their own business, and the signs in the back should stop them
Yeah,
from.
so I mean, that's something you
from
consider,
handling
saying to
that.
employees, you know, you park up over here. If you have to come down the street a little further, I think that's usually something we look at a lot, is to at least eliminate those 1 or 2 parking spaces, so. Saying that, any board members have any further comments? You having any further comments from Division Planning and Development?
No, sounds good.
I know you have a tough situation here in your hands trying to figure out, I mean, like Mr. Claremont said, that had to be big apartments upstairs
Yeah.
at one point in time.
Yeah, they'd be big units, and then we'd have the same parking problem again.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why, you know,
We'd be
maybe
back
when
to
you
square one.
had the, you know, when people had the building, you look at it, you thought they were so big, you know, why don't make them a little small and they could still be livable? But, so.
Do you already designate to your tenants that they have the ability to park at your other property?
Sometimes they just come,
Oh, no, excuse me, I let them, for the future, we haven't done that yet.
You haven't done that yet.
But clearly we will.
So that's another thing, you know, it might be a good idea to actually designate spots where they can park and
We'll-
communicate that to the tenants.
No, we're talking about the people that you allow to go across the street or up the street. We will let them
I
know.
think he's talking about his tenants now who park in the back,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it overflow parking for the tenants, you know, because you have 4 units up there and 7 parking spaces, so it, you know, even at that, they may have, you know, guests, or they may have additional vehicles. You know, I think it would be a good idea to designate to your tenants that they have the ability to park in these other lots across the street.
We can certainly, as part of the completion, hopefully, of this whole project, notify them of that and the availability. It's going to be a condition anyways that we supply additional parking off-site, and we absolutely will notify them. And actually, I think Manny can make it a regular part of any new tenancies when he usually gives them rules and regulations anyways, that can be noticed there as well.
Any further comments? Or what's the request of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to approve the special permit with conditions. And the conditions I'd suggest is that the applicant comply with the memorandum from Lisa DeMayo dated November 5th, 2010, with the modifications we just suggested. And I think the modifications were that in the removal of the impervious surfaces on the front and left sides of the building, on the left side, it will go just back to the front of the building and not down the side of the building. Also, the parking spaces that need to be 3 feet off the property line, that would not apply to the parking spaces in the rear of the property. And I think that was it on that. I think everything else was as it was set forth in the memorandum. In addition, the applicant will make parking spaces available across the street for the overflow parking for its residential people. And I think we had 2 other conditions that were on Aaron's memo. One, that the parking spaces in the rear of the building would be restriped to conform to the dimensional requirements, and that the dumpster would be screened. I think that was it.
I second that, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would say is if they don't apply to the rear property line, the parking 3 feet off the property line doesn't apply to the rear property line, but it would on the side property lines.
Correct. I think, Tony, the parking spaces need to be 3 feet off the property line, except for in the rear?
Except for the rear property line.
Right.
But we do want to keep the parking spaces in the rear 3 feet off the property lines on the left and the right.
Okay. So do we have a motion on the floor, motion made and second? All in favor, say aye.
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 Chair votes yes. Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion carries, 4 in favor and none against. Good luck and wish you well.
We thank you for your help, and hopefully we'll have a nice project when we're finished.
Thank
Thanks.
you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Moving along, our next matter is site plan amendment for Lowell General Hospital.
Okay, it's green. Good evening.
Let me just read the announcement if I could, please?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Next matter we have on the new business is the site plan approval amendment for Lowell General Hospital. The planning board will review a request from the Lowell General Hospital to amend the site plan approved during the July 19th, 2010 planning board meeting for an expansion project for the campus located at 295 Barnum Ave. The proposed plan amendment includes the addition of a helicopter pad, a reduction in parking spaces, in addition to the boiler house, and alterations to the retaining wall at the eastern entrance, among other changes. May we hear the case for the applicant, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Jerry Foley from Watermark. With me is Brian Cornell from RTKL Architects. As we talked about at the approval of this site plan back in July, one of the requirements was that we come back We are coming back, we're coming back with some revisions. Just a brief description of why there are revisions. This is a fast-track project. At the time we met with you, first of all, the project was not totally completed design-wise. The site planning portion of the project preceded the progress for the building itself. Hand in hand with that was what they call a value managing effort. Gilbane Construction was under contract to start pricing everything out, trying to buy out bid packages as they could get them from subcontractors. So periodically, and actually continually, Gilbane has been monitoring the temperature of this project with respect to the financing. So things changed along the way, and that's what we're here to present. The majority of what was proposed, we look at from a site planning point of view as a scaled-down version of what was originally submitted. However, there are some augmentations. If I could, I'd just like to get up and point them out quickly, and then we can do a little more detail. Okay, thank you. Sure, thanks. What we have here is just an overall site plan of the whole property. This is actually an American Land Title Association plan we did, which was part of the financing package. But the reason I'm showing you this is because unlike some of the other drawings that were submitted, it shows the entire site. So you get a feel for the property line, which is in green here, and where the actual built portion of the campus is. So the revisions that we're going to be talking about are several. One's the helicopter pad was not part of the original package. It just wasn't in there for financing purposes. There's been some give and take. There's actually been different allocations of funds that now make that feasible. And although it's feasible right now, we're still working with the owner in terms of the timing on this. This is probably a next year project, but we want to get it, in the discussion, for approval purposes. And if there are any concerns, obviously we want to address those because we know it has come up in the past and we know that it needs to be addressed. When we do the expansion, part of that expansion will be the demolition of the maintenance garage. So they need to replace the maintenance garage. What they're looking to do is put in a pre-engineered building. I'll make one revision to the submittal that we gave you earlier. Again, this is in progress. I think we said it was going to be a 30 by 60. It's a 35 by 75 metal pre-engineered building with 6 doors, and that will house all their equipment for the outside of the building, for the outside of the campus. As the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing plans develop, there'll be new switchgear put in to the boiler plant, and there's a major overhaul on all the underground utilities that'll be coming up, both feeding the existing structure and the proposed structure. And it became evident, not too long ago, probably about 3 months ago, a little less, that there wasn't enough room in the boiler plant to handle that switchgear. So what we want to do is we want to put a 25 by 25 plus or minus addition onto that building, fill out that L on the boiler plant, and it'll be a 1-story high bay area to handle that switchgear. The largest revision is in the layout itself. Again, this is a scaled-back version, and that happens in this area here, which is the proposed major parking lot for the new building, and then the new parking lot for the emergency department. So I can just take you through those briefly in a little more detail. There are a couple other ancillary things that come in as well. We looked at several different options for locating a helipad. MedFlight's been called in as a consultant, and the FAA has guidelines, but they aren't the approving authority. We still have to work everything through FAA in terms of flight paths and the safest way to do that. We looked at a couple of different versions of doing this. We looked at building retaining walls, backfilling it, providing a platform. But as it turned out, the governing factor here with respect to location is really that the entrance to the emergency department will be right through here. So what they want to do is they wanted to provide a helipad as close to that as they could feasibly get it. And the real purpose of this med flight is really not to take so much taking people to the hospital, but taking people from the hospital. It's really a packaging program, to get them in and get them out. It's a way station. So most of the helicopters are coming in empty and leaving with patients on them. And I think right now the number that I'm coming up, that I've heard most recently, was something like 35 trips a year. So it, yeah, it runs, you know. Let me see, is it right?
A month?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's not that frequent. And right now what they do is during the week, they go down to the field, Regatta Field, and during the weekends, they come to the site in the parking lot because there's more room available. So this right now is proposed to be a 60 by 60 pad. It'll have fall protection with screening and everything on it that'll meet the FAA requirements. It'll be lit. Right now it's designed, or hasn't been totally designed, but conceptually designed as a steel frame structure. There are utilities that run underground here, electric utilities, there are water, fire protection utilities. So that's why we decided to shy away from the earthen wall, or I should say the retaining wall here. At one point we had proposed to do that, but they said, no, let's just go with a steel frame structure. It'll be less intrusive, and we don't have to relocate all the utilities. A couple other things I do want to point out on this drawing that came in after the fact, and that's additional stairs, exterior stairs from some of these parking lots. More feedback from the hospital personnel indicated that, yeah, we do want to get another set of stairs in over here to the maternity. And there's an existing stair right now in the back right here that needs to be replaced. This is going to be the primary employee entrance from the parking lot out back. So there's a major bank of utilities coming out of the boiler plant up here. So this area is going to get disturbed pretty good. We're proposing to put in a temporary wood stair here during construction while they tear this up and get the new utilities in. Once that's all in, a new permanent stair will be put in here for the employees to go from the parking lot up into the employee entrance. This plan here shows the main parking area for the new bed tower building. Just to make it easier to see, I sketched on in this line right here where the edge of the pavement was under the original submittal. The owner, after some study and some costing, said, you know, let's take another look at this thing and see if we can save money and make it more appealing. We had originally had a retaining wall that went this whole distance all the way down to here to retain the earth and, you know, get some parking, and it was a pretty good sized project. So when we took another look at it in the interest of saving some money and making it more of an arrival experience, which is really what the client wanted, they wanted to have a dedicated way coming in with a continuous loop to the new front door in the drop-off area. So there's no parking, parallel parking, or this is not acting as an aisle for parking, it's acting as a dedicated roadway. So that when you come in here, the signage will point you in the right direction, you come up here, and then the drive off to the cancer center becomes a secondary route to go. Under the original design, it was the access to the cancer center that looked more like the primary way to get in. So that was really the big change in the design. What precipitated out of that was a loss in parking spaces in this parking lot. We added a little more green area, actually. We still have some interior retaining walls, but we lost all this retaining wall here. So we're just able to go with an earth slope now down to the detention pond. And we've cut the retaining wall just down to this piece right here. So it was a pretty good reduction. There was some discussion that we had at one of the earlier meetings with, I think Aaron was there, some discussion about the aisles and the drop-offs. Just to, I can get that, I want to address that maybe on this sheet and then on the next sheet. Subsequent to the first approval, the architects and the engineers have been developing this, you know, from schematic design through design development. Now they're getting closer to actual construction documents. So there's been some tweaking. So there's this new canopy that's proposed right here and columns associated with that. So we've had to adjust a few things and to make it line up with the drop-offs. And we know that there was some discussion about making the drop-off aisles more narrow than what we had proposed. We're proposing 12-foot wide drop-off aisles. We discussed this with the hospital, and the the suggestion from the city was to make those narrower, to reduce speeds if possible. And they've got Vanessa as a consultant for all their traffic. And they said under normal circumstances, they would go along with that if it was really like a drive-through traffic area, not a drop-off area. But especially at a hospital where doors are opening left and right, you know, people are trying to get in and out. For safety reasons, they thought the wider the better. So we stuck with the 12-foot aisles here. So as you come up, you have 1, 2, 3 lanes of traffic, you know, 1 to pull over and drop people off, and 2 that can get by. When I go to the, I think it's the next one. Yeah, when I go to the next one, this is the existing main entrance right here. And you know, there's a parking lot, I believe there's like a sunken parking lot here in front of the garage. Here's the garage. And here's the medical office building over here. We've redesigned this as well, and this has been scaled down. The last proposal that we sent you showed a series of 3 retaining walls and more parking in here, so this has been reduced in number of spaces as well. And again, just going to grass slopes. We got a set of stairs now coming up so that you can go directly from the handicap, or from the parking, I should say, all the way up here. All the handicap parking now moves up here at a higher elevation so that everything is handicap accessible. Where we did take the suggestion on width of aisle reductions was right here, because this is not a designated drop-off area. So initially we had these as 3 12-foot aisles, and they're now 3 10-foot aisles. So we were able to scope those down a little bit. And the way these work, there'll be 2 going out, 1 coming in. And there's an intersection right here. Lastly is just, again, picking up on that stairway that we added. There'll be a new crosswalk over here. This section of the site is still a little bit up in the air because we need to coordinate this with the stormwater separation that will happen as part of this project. And right now it's a cost issue right now as to whether or not the hospital is just going to do the stormwater separation or if they're going to do all the other improvements that go with it. So we're trying to work towards doing, you know, the whole thing, including a redesign of the drop-off areas. I'm sorry, the delivery areas. So those are the changes in general, and I can give you some quick numbers. So under the old plan, we had 109 new spaces, and under this plan, we're proposing 85. So we've lost 24 parking spaces overall. That's from both parking lots. And let me see, the total net gain in spaces for the whole project is still going to be 116 spaces. We're required by code to have 600 spaces for the whole hospital facility. The new number will be 1,403 spaces. That does not include the spaces that we picked up for the contractor parking. And I think the reduction in pavement overall is about 8,640 square feet. The city engineers were nice enough to meet with us prior to setting up this meeting with the planning board. They allowed us to make an early submittal on our drainage calculations. The drainage calculations have been reviewed. I don't know if you received anything formal from them.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. I did get an email from Lisa DeMeo today, and I forgot to pass it out, but basically her comment was no comment, so I would take that to mean that she was good with them. So I'll just pass this out right now.
So we had to retweak all of the...
Press release.
So we had to retweak all the drainage structures, you know, the elevations, the rims. We redid all the drainage calculations, submitted them, and they were nice enough to give us an early review on that because we knew it would take some time, and I'm happy to see that. Thank you. So that's all the news worth telling. And with respect to the helipad, I understand, I wasn't there, but I understand there were a couple of meetings with the Protectable Citizens Association. I think there were at least 2 meetings. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I'm just hearing this by hearsay. So I think the hospital's been trying to keep them. They know that it's a sensitive point that has come up before, and I think if you look at that plan, you can see that it's the location of that. It's not only a practical location for what the intent is, but it's about as central, you know, in plan as you could get, and as far away from the property lines as you could get on the property. So some thought's gone into it.
When they land there now, they land in the parking lot, correct?
Yes, they only do that on, from what I understand, they only do that on weekends because there's a reduction in parking and it's safer to do that. And I'm not even sure exactly what piece of it, I think it's the back piece, but then they have to put them in an ambulance and then drive them up to the emergency department. Or take them from the emergency department and drive them down to the helicopter, I should say.
Is the helipad raised?
Yes.
Okay. How
It's
far
gonna-
off the ground is it?
It's gonna be about 20 feet off of the ground.
Wow.
It's a side slope, you know, so it'll be. Section, you know, looking this way. Platform here, and this is a steel structure supported here and anchored back into here.
So you'd access the pad on the right side of that? Okay, I see. Can you flip to the page where you had the parking, the entrance? Yeah, this one. So the retaining walls here on the heavy dash line, I guess that's the prior.
Yep, and there'll be a short retaining wall here,
Okay.
you know, to retain the parking. I think there'll be a cast-in-place wall. Earlier, on an earlier version, you had a retaining wall in here, next to the sidewalk. We're gonna get rid of that. We're gonna put a landscape hedge in there that act as a barrier.
So the retaining wall that used to be on that outside line is no longer going to be there.
No, that's gone.
What is going to be between the road and the? Looks like it drops off relatively quick there.
We've got from here to here, we've got a 2.5, actually 2.5 to 1 slope.
Mm-hmm.
It just grades right up. And
So it's just the road and then
Yep.
some kind of a barrier along the side of the road or something, or a guardrail. Okay.
there's no sidewalk on that side.
Okay.
But then it'll just be green grass, and I think you might have some ideas for the landscaping of that.
Basically, what we're looking at doing is almost like a restorative landscape, and we've actually pulled guidelines from the state that look at creating like an early successional type of forest so that there won't be the need for mowing or anything like that. So in terms of disruption to, you know, the neighbors on the opposite side of the adjacent stream, I mean, it'll become more of it'll be treated more as a naturalistic versus a manicured landscape.
Okay.
And this is a renderer's version. There's a little artistic license in here. You
Okay.
might-
Yeah.
If you did an exact comparison with the plans, you might see some minor differences, but paints the picture, I think.
Mr. Foley, if I may, just a couple questions with the helipad, and you said I guess you're dealing both with med flight and FAA guidelines. Any of the requirements from either one of those agencies going to affect landscaping, site plan in any way, trees? And then I have some questions about the lighting too with the helipad, but,
Well, I'll just answer that.
Yep.
There were some misnomers associated with the way helicopters arrive and leave. They actually have to come in on an approach. So.
I know they come over my house, so
Yeah.
I'm pretty much aware of it.
But they actually, you know, they almost land like a plane in some cases.
Yeah.
You know, they come in on an approach and they take off on an approach. And somewhere at a designated location, there'll be a windsock, so they can monitor that. But one of the areas they were that we were concerned about, but they weren't as concerned about, interestingly enough, was the smokestack associated with the boiler plant. So they've been Mid-Flight's been out to the site. They've looked at all the possible locations and agreed that they could work with that particular location that we're showing on the drawing in terms of the operation of what they need to do. Now, in terms of the FAA guidelines, they work with this stuff all the time. There's going to be another consultant that comes in to work us through that, to make sure that we meet every single point of the FAA guidelines, and that Med-Flight will be cooperating on that effort as well. And yeah, there will be lights, like there are specific requirements for lighting, and, you know, for approaches and for fall protection. You can't have fences, because if they take off, they might catch a skid, so you have to put these horizontal catches out there that are all have specific design requirements. In terms of landscaping, I'll.
Excuse me, in terms of the landscaping, where it's really very limited. Basically, you're looking at, the bottom line is that the general rule of thumb is you can't have a vertical obstruction within the pad area that exceeds, I believe it's 6 inches. I'm kind of rusty on this. I actually wrote the planning criteria that the Navy and the Marine Corps uses for rotary wing aircraft, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And I know it's gone through a couple of permutations since then. But what Jerry has already talked about is very true. The FAA does have the final stamp of authority on this, and they are extremely strict guidelines that go into putting this together. And while we've preliminarily have positioned it on the site, the final design in terms of, as Jerry mentioned, fall protection, which is basically a chain link fence, if you will, that is not in a vertical position, but is more in a flat or a horizontal position, is required around this. And in terms of landscaping, to be sort of blunt about it, there really isn't any other than maybe a little bit of ground cover, and that is it.
Now, are you going to be required to take any trees down on the site that currently exist, or for flight approach or anything like that? No? Okay. And then on the lighting, I mean, I know it's pretty well lit as it is, and I was going to ask the question Mr. Genron did as far as the height of the helipad as it relates to the rest of the buildings that are there, but apparently it's actually going to be somewhat hidden, I suspect, from the rest of the height of the building. So the lighting is going to be at ground level, is that?
Yeah, interesting enough, yeah, it's kept down low, obviously, so they don't have to worry about pole mounted lights anywhere.
Sure.
And I guess they just shine horizontally across the surface to illuminate it.
Yeah, everything about a helipad for a rotary wing aircraft is very flat. It's very horizontal. You're not going to be faced with having pole-mounted fixtures around that, because that basically becomes another obstruction for the pilot to deal with.
And then the new road, or the reconfiguring of the road up top, will there be a need for any kind of a guardrail or anything on that?
There is a guardrail
there. Okay.
Yep.
All right. And, no, I think that you're going to have well-marked crosswalks. I can see that in the plan. I'm just a little concerned on the employee side, on the service side, crossing that road where the emergency room is going to be located, and
Yeah, we have them there. I don't know if they show up on that rendering or not.
yeah, no, I think I saw it on you earlier, but I mean, that would be a concern, because I think that particular roadway is going to be used in a different capacity than obviously the other entrance.
Actually, it's on the site, where is it? It's on the other plan that shows the striping. So there will be striping coming in. The idea is for them to come up these stairs, and then start, that's it.
Yep.
And then they're on a sidewalk and in the building.
Okay, and then further down over here, I guess, was a little bit of a concern I had.
Yeah, we have,
Because, I mean,
that one does show the striping.
yeah.
This is the same stair.
Yep, yeah. Yeah.
And again, the whole thought process behind this three-aisle approach here was to make sure that an emergency vehicle would always have an open lane.
Sure, yep. Okay, good. I have no further questions.
Does anybody here want to be heard on this matter? If you may, please. You state your name and address for the record, if you
Yes,
would, please, sir.
Raymond Hogue, 83 Varnum Avenue, officer of the PCC, and the hospital came to our meeting, which they explained it all, and then we had a meeting at the hospital last week with Boston Med Flight was there as well, explaining coming and going and all that. The only question that arose out of the meeting was, currently, every time a helicopter lands, he has a fire truck. And MedFlight didn't want to address the issue of fire suppression, and the hospital didn't seem to know about fire suppression at the pad. And that was a question. And there doesn't seem to be city guidelines for helicopters. And MedFlight's talked to us. Lowell General is going to be first, but Saints is going to have to do the same thing. So there needs to be probably some at least minimal guidelines within the city about helicopters, because Saints property is a lot more restricted than what they have at the General as far as helicopters coming and going. But MedFlight said that Boston, they have permanently mounted fire suppression because they're on rooftops. Leahy Clinic has a portable system. Helicopter comes in, the security people have to wheel out a portable fire suppression system. But there didn't seem to be any indication what their plans were at the hospital. And they couldn't even say whether or not it's a city ordinance, that every time they land, they have to have a fire truck and a police cruiser. If they go out to Colley Stadium, they do the same thing. If they go to Regatta Field, they do the same thing. If they go, there was 8 places they mentioned that are landing spots for the city that have been pre-designated, and all of those require police cruiser and fire truck. So we were just concerned. We fully agree with the project. We think the project is great. Getting the helicopter in the same spot all the time rather than going back and forth makes sense as far as the neighborhood goes, but we were just concerned about what's going to be done about fire suppression. That was the aviation fuel is more detrimental than gasoline, so, and MedFlight's had a great record, but you wouldn't want to be the first one to have to figure out what's going to happen if something does happen. So, but the project itself, everything about it so far, has been going very good. And if you haven't been up there, they got one heck of a big hole. I mean, they have gone deep. So, but the fire suppression was the big issue.
And did you say MedFlight had no comment regarding the fire?
Their comment about fire suppression was they feel that they land safely with or without it based on local zoning codes and requirements. He said they would feel safe landing without it. They obviously feel safer landing with it, but they weren't going to be the one to judge what has to be done for the fire suppression.
So it looks like it may be some sort of a local regulation they're looking for. It's
Yeah.
not FAA or anything like that that would...
Although I guess on rooftops, I guess that's a mandatory when they go up on the rooftops. He said, when they go into New England Medical or something like that, it's a complete built-in system, where Leahy is a little bit different. He mentioned the one up in Nashua has a portable system where they go, wherever they land up in Nashua has a portable thing. I know when they bought Engine 10 for Pawtucketville, the brand new fire truck, when they showed us that fire truck, that was the only one in the city that was equipped with foam because of their constant trips to Regatta Field. So that was like one of the issues, was that that truck was available to handle helicopters. I know you mentioned a little bit about, you said underground there would be something about fire underneath the ramp.
Well, there's an existing fire suppression line, that water main, that runs right underneath it right now. So,
But that's for the hospital buildings.
yeah, that's for
Yeah,
the whole,
yeah.
that's for the whole hospital fire suppression system.
And I guess if it's the hay lawn, you've got to have climate control building to keep it in and all that kind of stuff that's at the ramp level. So a lot of that needs to be still looked at. But other than that, we're, full agreement that it's a great thing, because you want it there if you need it. And they did mention, MedFlight did mention that 99% of the incoming is east to west, and then they depart going west. So they come in over the university, go in, and then take off and go out the other way, and then hook a left to go back into Boston. So that's it.
Do you guys have any comments on the whole fire suppression situation?
I have no knowledge of, that's a new one to me, so we certainly should look into that, I think.
I would say in all fairness, I think we'll follow up with our client, the hospital, and if it requires an additional meeting, it sounds like it will with MedLife, we'll make sure that that's done, and then I'll recommend to Lowell General that they report back to the local citizens. It's something that if it's required, then it's required, but if it's not a local ordinance, it's almost a best practice type of approach.
And I can
We
follow
don't
up.
have too many helipads in Lowell, so.
Well,
I know
yeah,
of
and I'm
anyway,
not trying to
so-
be ambiguous with giving you an answer. I'm trying to be trying to be honest and upfront
Right.
about it.
Just maybe some new ground for us, so.
Yeah,
Right.
and I can follow up with the fire department safety officer to see.
That's
you know,
probably a good idea.
I didn't realize they sent it, I didn't know they sent an ambulance, I mean, a fire truck out there.
The current situation is that when the hospital requests a helicopter, first phone call is for the helicopter, second phone call is to the fire department from the hospital. So,
Jerry, I know they have one at Lawrence General, the helicopter pad. Maybe you can find out some information from them. You know, what they use for fire suppression, or, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I've never used it, but I've seen it there. And the only one other one I can think of on hand is the one at Ann and Jake's, but that's just right by the parking lot.
Yeah.
That's not even on a pad situation.
Yeah, there've been, like anything else, there is different levels of quality.
I understand that, so, but I mean, maybe that, you know, just something for fire suppression or something, how they've addressed it, or just sometimes you look at neighborhood, cities and towns to see how they have addressed it.
Yeah, I think the Leahy Clinic almost sounds like a building code requirement.
Right. Well, the thing is too, is it's different here, is that it's not located on top of a building structure, so that sort of simplifies it slightly. The other thing that simplifies it a little bit more is its frequency of use, and the suppression system is a big capital investment for the hospital, so they may be anticipating that they're gonna continue with their current practice of having that piece of fire apparatus arrive on site before the helicopter comes into land. But again, I don't know, but I will follow up with the client and have them address this.
Does anybody else want to speak on this project?
Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board, my name is Mark Goldman, 58 Oakland Street, Lowell, Mass. I wish to record in favor of this. I spoke at this on July 19th in favor of this, and I support the changes that are being made. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Any board members have any further comments? If not, we have basically two things before us tonight. One, we have to consider first if the board finds that the request change amounts to a significant and material change. If we vote that it does, then we must review it again at public hearing. If we vote that it does not, then we can act on it as a non-significant material change. So if we feel that it's minor, given the scope of the project, and the merit of the project can be reviewed at this time, and be put to a vote before the board tonight with any conditions that we approve as an amendment to the adopted site plan.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that after reviewing the proposed changes, that we find that the changes are not significant and material to the original plan.
Okay?
Second that.
Motion made and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes, so that motion carries, no opposition. The next matter would be whether we want to adopt the amendment to the site plan as proposed, or with conditions, or any discussion on that with the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt the proposal as proposed.
Can I just add with a caveat, maybe just to follow up back with us, or give us some info in regards to the helipad? Sure. Because I know on your drawings, you gave us an alternative location, and I understand that's to depend upon,
Actually, no, that's been changed. You know, at the time we submitted,
okay,
it hadn't been decided yet.
okay, gotcha.
Between then and now, they've decided.
I thought that was still up in the air with
They just-
who
that
you're
decision-
working for with the helicopter people, whether
Last
they want to
Thursday, they
be
made a
moved.
decision where they wanted.
Oh, okay, all right. So maybe we'll just report back on that, because I know the previous motion that we had was to come back to us on a regular basis with a report, so maybe we just get a report back on that. Okay, you have no objections on adding that, Mr. Chairman? Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor that we approve the site plan as amended.
Second.
Motion made and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes. Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion carries.
Thank you
Good
very
luck
much.
and thank you. Thank you for the input that's night. Moving on under old businesses, we do have 3 matters tonight, which are for the zoning board of appeal matters that come before us for recommendation only. And these are matters that are gonna appear on the zoning board of appeals agenda for November 22nd, 2010 at 6:30 here at the city council chambers. The first matter is for a Franco-American school on 357 Pawtucket Street. This is for an internally illuminated and existing freestanding poly sign pursuant to section 6 of the zoning code. So it looks like they want to put a new sign at the school.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, I'm going to recuse myself from the discussion and recommendation on the Franco.
Okay. Any board members have any recommendations? We want to send it to the design, the sign planner, or any comment on the sign? There's a picture of it in the packet. It doesn't appear to be too tall, showing that the woman next to it is 5'6", so the sign isn't too intrusive. What, 8 feet tall and...
Mr. Chairman, can we refer this to our chief planner in charge of signs for report and recommendation? Make that a
Motion made in second? And all in favor, say aye. Chair votes yes. So we have 3 in favor. We're going to refer this to our design planner for the Franco-American School. Moving along, we have a variance for James Demers at 15 Bristol Street to maintain an existing pool and deck without the proper side and rear yard pursuant to section 5 of the zoning ordinance. Minimum side yard and yard regulations they need variance for.
Mr. Chairman, it looks like the house and garage are pretty close to the lot line now, so there must be pre-existing non-conforming structures there. And as far as the deck is concerned, I think even if you were constructing a deck, can you put a deck, Aaron, up to 120 square feet right up to the lot line? Is that correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
This
so
is for
It's
above
considered
ground pool,
usable
right?
open space.
yeah, it's for the deck and the pool, so the deck might be a little bit larger than that, but if it was the deck itself, you could build up to 10 by 12 without a variance, so I wouldn't necessarily have an issue with that, and it appears he's got a lot of his neighbors' support as well. They must all use the pool, so
Yeah.
I'd make a recommendation to approve.
The motion for approval. Any board members have any comments or discussion?
I'd second that, Mr. Chairman.
Motion is made in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes. Recommend approval. The motion carries. The next matter is for a special permit, and this is at BPV of Lowell LLC for 150 Weston Ave to request an amendment to the prior approval to increase the number of live workspace units from 46 to 50 pursuant to section 12 of the zoning ordinance. This is the matter that I believe came before us in the Board of Appeals before. This is for Artist Overlay District, so they want to increase the numbers from 46 to 50. I mean, main concern I first had was over there would be the parking. I do see on their chart, they require 208, and they have 221. So that was one of the first concerns I have, because I know that was one of the issues that we did address before, and they did appear to have plenty of parking.
Bless you. It's hard to tell, Mr. Chairman, from the bare submittal where they're adding on, but, and I have to presume it meets all the zoning code, because they're not showing it as being deficient in any respect, so, I don't know if it's a reconfiguration of the space that they have now to add the 4 additional units or not.
Do you have any comments on this, Aaron, from the plan department? Joe?
Joe's indicating to me that there's no additions to the structure itself, it's just a
Reconfiguration of the interior space.
They meet the
some
parking?
efficiency. What I've, as similar to Joe, we're kind of at this point presuming that the zoning is correct, although I think that's something that we would want to flesh out a little bit in the zoning board of appeals hearing to make sure that they do have the parking and it's adequately
I know,
allocated to the
actually, we got
units.
they had one of the shows from Boston come in and did a segment on this. The artist industry, yeah. About 6 months ago or so, maybe longer. I forget
Was
which.
it Chronicle?
It might have been, yeah, it was Chronicle.
I remember
Yeah.
hearing about that,
With
actually.
I don't know if it was, what's her name, Mary Richards, was it her or someone else? But
That sounds right,
there's
yeah,
an
actually,
article in
now
the
that you
Lowell Sun
mention it.
saying they were coming in, and there was a whole thing about how great it was and what it drew to the city and the benefit it did, and,
Oh, good.
so, I mean, shed some positive light on the city of Lowell. So, I mean,
We get a lot of good press now.
so, I would have no objections to it. I think it's a nice project over there, and I think when it came before us to begin with, there was a couple of concerns, and the applicant did a very good job at addressing most of the concerns, and it was nice to see a lot of people in the city taking advantage of this situation. So I personally have no problems with it. Looking at it, I see the parking spaces were there, that was a concern. I know at first there was some question with the abutters and where the lines were, and whether the street should be opened up all the way through, and whether the city should open that street all the way up, where the new Dunkin' Donuts was, and, but we looked at a lot of those concerns. I think they addressed most of those concerns, so I personally have no objections to the increase in, the structure.
So I'd make that motion, recommend approval if it complies with the zoning requirements.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Moving along, we just have a couple of other matters. I think we handled a few things tonight for notices from budding towns. Entertain a motion to place them on file.
So moved.
Moved in second. All in favor, say aye. Those matters on file. Let's see. Moving along, any further correspondences? Anything from the planning development?
I just did want to point out in one of those items I passed out with the notices that this Thursday is going to be the second of the visioning sessions with NEMCOG. This one's in Tewksbury. So if you didn't get a chance the first time around, there's a second year follow-up chance or to reiterate what you said the first time. And then we have received a submission for definitive subdivision for the extension of Berkeley Ave just off of Rogers Street. And then we've also got a petition for rezone at 301 Chelmsford Street that will be, there'll be notice going out for that for the December 6th meeting. I think it's currently a traditional multifamily district that they're looking to change to a neighborhood business district. It's a landlocked parcel, but Joe and I will have the information out to you soon, but just as a heads up, that'll be coming down the line soon. And lastly, Walgreens at Wood and Middlesex, you may have noticed in the city council agenda that there was some money from the developer gifting the planning board. It's not for a trip or anything. It's to cover the peer review study, traffic study that was requested to the planning board that the applicant pay for, just to go through and have another set of eyes to look at the traffic impacts. And my understanding is that the applicant have been reworking the traffic study because it's now, the original one's now like 3 or 4 years old. So that has been, as you know, gifted to the city, and I believe the pre-application and preliminary subdivision will be on for the December 6th meeting. And then there'll be a public hearing, probably the first or second meeting in January.
You know who did the traffic study?
I don't. I believe it was, I'm just going on memory, I think it was Van Ness. I'm not sure
Original
if that's who it
traffic
was.
study?
Yeah.
You know who's doing the peer review?
Yeah, it's TEC is the peer review company. They've done some work in the city. They did some of the traffic. I believe they've done some of the traffic or some of the civil engineering for the Hamilton Canal District. and also the Market Basket redevelopment up on Bridge Street. They worked that project as well. So.
The only addendum I have is, last Tuesday, myself, Mr. Fischett, and Rich Lockhart came to the city council subcommittee meeting that was here last Tuesday for the subcommittee on zoning, and actually, we had the full 9 councilors here. And they, it was talk about what our recommendations were. Jerry spoke briefly, I spoke briefly, and Adam was here, and he came up with a type of plan that seemed to work for the neighborhood for both sites. What Pawtuckaville Neighborhood Association had in mind, what Centerville had in mind to take care of their one individual site, maybe to rezone the partial land with some of the concerns that we addressed in the past and how they're gonna get around that. And we indicated how basically we either willing to go along with that plan, look at it being more stringent by a special permit or whatever, and obviously I couldn't vote on it. They have it on the agenda again tomorrow night. I don't know if that requires a vote tomorrow night or if they have to push it out again.
Tomorrow night's the public hearing. I think typically they do vote the same night, but I've also been to meetings where they've pushed it out to the following where they actually take the vote.
But it was, it was supposed to be a subcommittee meeting, but it was, all the 9 councilors were here, there was no doubt about it, so I'm not, we had a quorum on the planning board, and it was a good discussion, and it was, I think, and hopefully it's gonna benefit both neighborhoods and the city at large, so that was nice to see and have that work out well, so. Any other board members have any further comments? Oh, the only other thing I did have is, I know you gave us the agenda for 2011. We had that schedule. I don't know if the board members had a chance to digest that, or you want to put it over to the next meeting when Rich is with us, or you want to pass it tonight? I'm fine with it either way, whatever your concerns are. I know we had at the last meeting, we said we'd just look it over further. Anybody have any comments on that? Want to adopt it tonight, or? It's, and anybody else want to look at it? We can go over it at the next meeting when we have Rich with us. It doesn't matter to me either way.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, if we have known conflicts, how do we want to handle that? Do you want to just, so I know I have a conflict on the 20th of January, I won't be here. Doesn't mean you can't continue the meeting without me, but I don't know if you want to try to reschedule something like that to have a full board, or
What was the date that you have? January, what is it? January?
January 20th.
What did I put?
I'm sorry.
I have mine down here.
That's the meeting date.
Mr. Chairman, I think it'd be a great opportunity to exercise the Mullen Rule if we have a
There you go. There you go, now you're
public
talking.
hearing on.
That's
We
a
tried
good
it
idea.
tonight, but they
Forgot about
take us,
that.
so.
Do you have the internet where you're gonna be?
Yeah, and that's a Thursday meeting too, so,
That's fine, actually, that's a good point, I can,
we can look at that, and also, any applicants coming in, you can let them know that we might be missing a meeting,
Yeah, I'll know.
remember that evening. And then the other ones, usually, I know if we have questions with any of the other ones, we try to address them. So I'd like to go vote on this tonight, so we have it down, and then we can always try to amend it as we move along into the next year. Is that acceptable to all board members? Have any questions on it? Sure.
That's fine with me.
So I'll entertain a motion to adopt the 2011 planning board meeting schedule and the submittal deadlines.
So moved.
Second?
Motion made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes. Motion carries. Having said that, no further comments, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made and second. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.